Hi everyone, it's Jennifer from Flux. In this video, I'm going to show you how to crochet this wonderfully soft and warm and cozy holiday greenery throw. This is a really fast project. We're going to be using some fun, festive, variegated yarn. You can use any yarn you like. We're going to talk about the yarn weight and the substitutions a little bit later, but this is a very fast corner to corner square blanket. So we're going to be starting, let me just move it here. We're going to be starting from the bottom and working our way outward and upward, and then about halfway through we're going to come back inward to create a square. Now this is really fast. Like I said, we're going to be using a large hook and some big squishy yarn, and this is perfect for winter, and it's festive colors for the holidays, but it's also pretty neutral. It kind of is like a mossy green and like a deep burgundy, so this would be lovely throughout the winter as well. You can really have it on your couch or your bed, or makes a lovely throw just about anywhere, and it makes a great gift too. So if you really need a fast blanket, maybe two for charity or a quick gift, this is a wonderful blanket for that. Now the finished blanket is, like I said, it's square, and it measures about 53 inches wide and 53 inches tall. So it's a nice little size to drape just about anywhere, and again, it whips up really quickly. I also wanted to mention before we get started and talk about the supplies, you can find this pattern on the blog, the written pattern. Here on the YouTube channel, we're going to go through the whole thing every step of the way. So the full tutorial is here on the channel as well. Also, you can get the ad-free PDF in my Etsy shop. All the links to the video, the written pattern, and where to get the pattern PDF can be found down below. So let's get started. For this project, you'll need a pair of scissors, a tapestry needle. We're going to be using a 10mm P crochet hook. This is a pretty large hook. As a side note, this is my Furls Streamline. This is the Peppermint Swirl. I'll put the link down below in a coupon code if you'd like to get one for yourself. This is a really pretty and kind of festive hook to use. And then for our yarn, we're going to be using 880 yards of super bulky 6 yarn. Now I have 4 balls here of Bernat blanket, and I loved how it was sort of like a muted seasonal palette of greens, and they do call this color Plum Fields, but to me in person it looks more like a burgundy color, so it looked kind of like a muted holiday color palette. I'm going to be using 4 balls of this. This yarn, if we look at the yarn label here again, it's a super bulky 6 on the yarn weight scale. Let me zoom in so you can see that label a little bit better. And it recommends a USL 8mm hook, but I want my blanket to have some nice drape to it, so we are going to go up a couple of hook sizes for this with the 10mm P hook. And again, each ball of this is 220 yards, so we are going to be using half of this yarn to do the increased portion of our blanket, and we're going to use the other 2 balls of yarn to bring it back in to create our square. So 880 yards total for this blanket. And again, if you want to replicate the color and make it kind of festive, this is called Plum Fields, and it does come in dye lots. And this yarn is machine wash and dry, just as a side note. If you're giving it as a gift, sometimes it's nice to you know, give something that's machine washed, because a lot of people like to just be able to throw things in the washing machine. So again, 880 yards of super bulky 6 yarn. So let's get started. So like I mentioned before, we're going to use half of our yarn to create the first part of our blanket. Now if you took a square and turned it on its side to make a diamond, we're going to start at that bottom point and work upwards and outwards to make half of our blanket. And then we'll take the other 2 balls of yarn later, and I'll show you how to bring it in to complete our corner to corner square. Okay, so grab one of your balls of yarn to start, and I sort of dug around the inside of this and pulled it from the center. It's really nice because it won't be rolling all around. You can just kind of pull as you work, but it's up to you how you want to do it. So what we need to do first is put a slip knot on our hook. So grab your yarn, wrap the yarn around your fingers to make a loop. Bring the yarn behind the loop, reach in with your hook, bring up the loop, and tighten. Next, what we're going to do is chain 6 to begin. So to make a chain, wrap the yarn around the hook and bring it through the loop. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Now this is a variegated yarn that changes colors pretty quickly, so it'll be a really fun project to work on if you're doing variegated. This yarn also comes in solid colors as well, as a side note. The next thing we're going to do is work a double crochet into the 4th chain from the hook. So this loop here does not count. We're going to go 1, 2, 3, and 4. Now this yarn is very fluffy, so you might have to kind of feel for your chains a little bit. To make a double crochet, wrap the yarn around the hook, insert the hook into that 4th chain from the hook, bring up a loop. You'll have 3 loops on your hook. Wrap the yarn around the hook again, bring it through the first 2 loops. Wrap the yarn around the hook, bring it through the last 2 loops. Then you'll have 2 chains left. You're going to work a double crochet into each one of those. So double crochet into the next chain, and double crochet into the next chain. This is our first block of our blanket, and you can see because we're using fluffy yarn and a big hook, that's a pretty big block. So you'll want to keep your tail also intact. I use my tail when I'm doing corner to corner just to get myself started, because that tail is going to be pointing towards you, and that will show this is the bottom corner of our blanket. Okay, so the tail really helps to kind of mark your spot. Okay, so for the next part, we're going to add 2 more blocks onto this. So for row 2, what we're going to do is chain 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. And then we're going to work a double crochet once again into that 4th chain from the hook. Remember, this loop doesn't count. Go 1, 2, 3, and 4. So in that 4th chain from the hook, work a double crochet once again. And then in each of the next 2 chains. So work a double crochet into that next chain, and a double crochet into the chain after that. And you can see we've changed colors a bunch of times already. So now we need to join our blocks together, but we need to sort of get this one in the right spot. So remember that tail I told you about? What you need to do is sort of pick it up and turn it if you need to, making sure that tail is pointing towards you. And you'll see, remember that turning chain we did at the end of the first block? What you'll want to do is work a slip stitch into that turning chain space. You can see it's kind of like a hoop. It almost looks like a little tiny purse with a handle, if you will. So right in that space, work a slip stitch. Insert the hook into that space, bring up a loop, bring that loop through the loop that's already on your hook. Okay, now our blocks are joined together. Your tail is still sort of facing you. It really does help when you're starting out. Next, what we want to do is chain 3. So 1, 2, 3. And then we're going to work 3 double crochets into that same turning chain space where we worked our slip stitch. So 1 double crochet into that turning chain space, 2 double crochet into that turning chain space. Let me get a little bit more yarn here. And then 3 double crochet into that turning chain space. Okay, so row 2 is complete. When you complete row 2, you'll have 2 blocks across. So row 2, 2 blocks, easy to remember. Again, keep your little tail pointing towards you. It does keep you from getting anything twisted up, okay? Next, what we're going to do is work on row 3. Now you're going to do each row like I just did the same way. We're going to do a couple rows together just to kind of get you started. And if you're unfamiliar with corner to corner, it'll help you kind of get the hang of it, okay? So anytime we begin a new row, when we're increasing like this, now when we get halfway through our blanket, we'll change it up a little bit what we do. But as we're doing this first part increase, each time we start a new row, we're going to chain 6. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Next, we're going to work a double crochet into that 4th chain from the hook. Remember, this loop doesn't count. Go 1, 2, 3, 4, kind of feeling those chains as you go. Work a double crochet into that 4th chain from the hook. Work a double crochet into the next chain. And work a double crochet into that next chain, okay? Now, we need to hook our blocks together. So what we need to do is sort of turn our work. So remember that tail is facing towards you. That helps you know where to go. And then in that turning chain, see this first block we come to? That turning chain at the top here, we're going to work a slip stitch into that turning chain. And then we're going to chain 3. 1, 2, 3. Now in that same turning chain space, let me zoom out because our piece is getting a little tiny bit bigger. In that same turning chain space, work 3 double crochet. 1, 2, and 3. Okay, let's connect it to this next block. Work a slip stitch into that turning chain space once again, and chain 3. 1, 2, 3. And then in that same turning chain space, work 3 double crochet. You can see I'm pulling lots of yarn out of here. It really goes through the yarn very quickly. So 1 double crochet in that turning chain space, 2 double crochet in that turning chain space, and 3 double crochet in that turning chain space, okay? So row 3 is complete. You can see we have 1, 2, 3 blocks. Now our yarn is variegated, so the colors are making it look a little jumbly, but I do love the colors, but you can still see 1, 2, 3 blocks across, okay? Let's do one more row together. This is done the same exact way. I'm just going to show you one more time so you can kind of crochet with me if you still need to practice. Okay, so once again, we're starting a new row, row 4. So we're going to chain 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Once again, in that 4th chain from the hook, 1, 2, 3, 4, work a double crochet. I'll go a little faster this time since we've done this a few times together already. Work a double crochet into the next chain, and work a double crochet into that next chain. Now we need to turn our work once again. See how it's sort of sideways on us? We need to turn it so that that little tail is pointing downward again. And we're going to go to that next block and connect them together. So go look for that turning chain space, work a slip stitch into that turning chain space, and chain 3. 1, 2, 3, and then we're going to go into the same turning chain space and work 3 double crochet. 1, 2, and 3, all in that same turning chain space. And I gotta say, if you're using blanket yarn like I am, this is already really soft and squishy. It's makes a wonderful afghan. Okay, next, join with a slip stitch into that next block that you come to, and chain 3. 1, 2, 3. Work 3 double crochet into that same turning chain space. So 1, 2, and 3. All right, once again, last block of the row, we have our turning chain space at the top. Join with the slip stitch to connect them together, and chain 3. 1, 2, 3. Work 3 double crochets in that same turning chain space. 1, 2, and 3. Just like that, okay? So what you're going to do now is just keep repeating this row over and over and over again. And then what I like to do too is after I've worked a few rows, you can kind of straighten things out a little bit. So what you're going to do is just keep repeating that row over and over and over. You can sort of see we're getting a square shape already, okay? So we're increasing and growing it taller and wider, and you're just going to keep going until you've used about half of your yarn. So I have my other ball here. Now, you may not have the same amount as me. You may be wanting to make a different size. So when your blanket, if you have a different amount that you're using, when your blanket is about half the size you want it to be, stay tuned because we're going to switch gears and learn how to bring our square back in to finish it, okay? So go through and make your square, your blanket, about half the size you want it to be. And then when we rejoin, we're going to learn how to finish it up, okay? I'm going to be using, I have 2 balls, each 220 yards. So I have 440 yards for the beginning part of my blanket, and then I'll save the other 440 yards for the end of my blanket, okay? So keep repeating that row, and we'll rejoin in just a minute. Okay, just coming up to the end of our row, working those last few double crochets. And so now we're going to be, as we finish this last block, we're going to be moving on to the next part. So join those last 2 blocks with a slip stitch to join them together. And you can see how far we've come. We've worked outward. Now we're going to start coming back inward with our blanket. So I don't have a ton of yarn left, not enough to kind of start a new row. So at this point, we're ready to move on to the next part. We grabbed our other 2 balls of yarn to make the second half of our blanket as we move inward. So then what we're going to do is grab our project again, and we need to slip stitch along the sides to give ourselves a straight edge as we come inward. So what you want to do is turn your work over, just like that, and see there's the bottom point where we started. And then we're just going to turn the work, and you can see how far we've come. We've done quite a bit here. So it's a nice half of a blanket size. And then we're going to just kind of reposition everything to get ourselves back. So those were the 2 blocks we just did. So what we're going to do is work a slip stitch in each of those 3 stitches along the side of the edge there. And then that will give us the little point and the next corner of our blanket. We're creating another corner of our square. So we're going to work a slip stitch into that first stitch. So you can kind of see them laid out. So work a slip stitch into that first stitch, work a slip stitch into the next stitch, work a slip stitch into the last stitch, just like that. And then you're also going to work a slip stitch into that turning chain space, okay? And now we're ready to start a new row as we're decreasing our blanket. So you can kind of turn it if you need to get yourself into a better position. And you can see we now have sort of like a right angle of our blanket. So we've created another corner there. So what you need to do when we start our new decrease row is, again, we just have a little bit of yarn. We're going to just tie it right on when we get to that point. We're going to chain 3 to start the row. 1, 2, 3. And in that turning chain space, once again, we're going to work 3 double crochet. So I still have a little bit of yarn there, but I'm just going to use what I have. It's not quite enough to do the whole row, but I'm just going to use what I have left and tie the new yarn on when it's time. Okay, so we worked our 3 double crochets, and that made our first block of the row. You can see we're getting a flat side there. And then we're going to join with a slip stitch. Same thing we've been doing, we're just working across the row now. We're just starting the row a little bit different to create a little bit of a different shape. Work 3 double crochets in that next turning chain space. Same thing we've done. This part will seem very familiar. You can see as we work across, and we're going to join with a slip stitch. Same thing, just showing you a little bit down the row here so you know. Chain 3, 3 double crochet into that turning chain space. Just like that. Okay, so what you want to do is just continue the way you've been across the row. And then when we get towards the end of the row, what we're going to do is rejoin. I'm going to show you how to do the end of the row too, so that it can also taper in on that side as well. Okay, so we continued all the way across, and now what we're going to do is the same thing that we did earlier on in the row. So we're going to, I'm just working those last 3 double crochets of the row just to create that last block. 1, 2, and 3. And then what we're going to do is join with a slip stitch, same thing we've been doing, into the block in that turning chain space to connect the 2 blocks together. So you can see on this side too now we have a flat edge, and we're going to turn our work very similar to what we just did. And then we have our yarn, and we're going to, you can see I've actually joined a new ball of yarn as well in the middle of that row. So now we're going to do a slip stitch across like we did before. So slip stitch into that first stitch, slip stitch into the next stitch, slip stitch into that third stitch, and then work a slip stitch into the turning chain space as well. And then you can see we now have a corner here on this end as well. So we have 3 corners now of our blanket. It makes a nice little like right angle. Then we're going to chain 3. 1, 2, 3. Work 3 double crochets into that space. Same thing we've been doing. This part will be very familiar as well. So work your 3 double crochets, join with a slip stitch, chain 3. Very similar to what we've been doing all along, okay? So as you move through, what you're going to do is just keep repeating that row that I just showed you over and over and over again. And as you work more rows, it will start coming in and create that top pointy part of the blanket. It's kind of like the diamond shape that we've been talking about. So keep going with your rows, and when we rejoin, we'll be at the very top part of our blanket, and we'll close up the top, and I'll show you how to finish it off. So keep going with your rows, and we'll rejoin in just a minute. Okay, just working those last few stitches of our blanket. So we came all the way up, and now this is the last box, the little top corner that we're gonna finish up right now. So I did my 3 double crochets, and then we're gonna join with a slip stitch in the box next to it. And here it is. It looks great. It is so pretty and festive, but also definitely neutral for the home. It's not, you could kind of just leave this on all winter. I think it looks it almost has like a winter garden look to me. So the last thing we need to do is cut our yarn, and we're going to fasten off. Just pull that through the loop there, and then just grab your tapestry needle. And any ends that you have, you want to weave those in. So I'm just going to take mine, I threaded my tapestry needle, and I'm going to go in one direction here with my tail. Now this is a very fluffy, kind of forgiving yarn. Your ends really do disappear and kind of stay put. All right, we're going to go in one direction into some of those stitches, and then we'll come back in the other direction with our tail. And then give it a little trim. And then we'll just go around and just kind of repeat for the other tails that we have. So our ends are all woven in, and now we have a warm, beautiful, squishy blanket. So that is how you crochet the holiday greenery throw. Thanks so much for watching, and be sure and click the subscribe button to get all the latest Fiber Flux video updates. Thanks again.